guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. We are here with our lovely friend Ellen, who has been on the channel a couple of times. It is our last reading roundtable of 2025. So while normally what we do is give a little introduction about ourselves and like who we are as readers, and then go around and talk about books, we're going to do something a little bit different this time, and talk a little bit about our year in books, especially because we're all folks that have been on the channel before. If you want to hear us talk about what we normally read, there's plenty of other videos where you can go and see us talk about that. And then we did all bring just something that we've read recently that we wanted to talk about for the main portion of the video, as normally is. So if you want to hear a little bit about, how our year in books was, if we had reading goals and if we achieved them or are almost achieving them, because there is still a little bit more time in the year, then please stick around. As always, we're going to start with the lovely Gretchen, because she is where we start.
Oh boy, my year in reading. For anyone who's been watching my individual videos or has seen me on some of these other ones, you know that this year has just been a struggle. My mental health had some questionable moments this year, many of them actually. And it's just been really hard. And I think the problem with that is that just I did my dissertation earlier this year and I ended up, or my dissertation data collection, and I ended up being so burnt out by that I am still in recovery. Because even though there was the summer, I was working, and then I teach predominantly freshmen and I love them so much. But the thing about teaching freshmen in the fall is that they are brand new to everything.
Little baby.
And because they're tiny, and they need help, extra help with what even is our learning platform and all this type of stuff. So it's just a little bit of extra stuff. Usually, and again, I also want to put this in perspective of everybody's reading goals, how many books they read. There is not an optimal number of books to read. If you're reading, good for you. If you're listening to audiobooks, that counts as reading. And I'm here to also tell you that at this point, podcasts also, essentially they're podcast series that are books. I don't know how else to put that. So, but I'm usually a person who every year reads about 100 books. I have done over 200. I think the year of COVID, I did 250 that year.
Wild.
I coped. So normally, when you set your I want to read this many books this year. I usually set it at 100. This year, as of taping, I have read 56 books this year. And again, I just mean to put this in perspective of that's a lot for some people, but for me, that's it kind of feels like an absence that I've had this year of not reading, which has been really sad, or not reading this. I had to do a giant lit review for my dissertation, right? So I've been reading, but not anything that I would want to tell any of you about. I'll tell my dissertation committee. So it's been hard. I talked about, we talked about some reading goals when we did our January reading roundtable. And one of the things that I had said there was I really miss fantasy, and I would really like to get back to read more of that. That has not really happened because I read a lot of romance, and particularly contemporary romance. So I thought maybe romantasy would be a good way to kind of ease back into that. But my brain has been yeah, that 300-page romance novel where they kiss, this is too much brain power. So yeah, needless to say, I'm not trying to tackle a fantasy world because my brain is just I'm so tired. So yeah, I have though been listening to a lot of podcasts. And I've brought one of those today because I haven't been reading. So I'm going to tell you guys about a podcast, kind of representative of how this year has gone for me. So I hope for better in 2026. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. It's me, Ellen. Hi. This is my first year using Storygraph for the whole year as I departed from separated myself from Goodreads and Amazon. I do miss Goodreads. You two are my only friends on Storygraph.
Oh no.
But I set a goal for 50 books, and I'm on my 47th book, which is a lot for me, and I think it's the most I've ever read. Some highlights of this year. I started reading the Lord of the Rings series. I think I talked about this previously. Just men talking and singing and walking. Um, I read the first two and I would thought, oh, I might save the last one for later. I did read some fantasy and horror, which is mainly what I read. And I think that my number is low because I'm only seeing 3 graphic novels. And sometimes when I read a lot of I think last year I read at least 10. That really ups my number. Um, but one of them was called, I'm scrolling right now, The Raven Boys. And I read it and I was like, this is so good. And then I realized it was based on a novel. And I was like, gosh darn it, I should have read the novel first because now I kind of know what's going on. Um,
We'll say that series is like quite well beloved, so yeah, it's
I didn't
probably
even
worth it.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know. I would go back and read the novel. But I will say that the graphic novel is very good. I read 3 books by Alex Michaelides. That was like at the beginning of the year. And yeah, more of that, please. And yeah, some overall witchy vibes, I'll say, for my year.
Nice.
Witchy vibes.
I would love if Storygraph would do something where it was like kind of like when Spotify does rap sometimes,
Yeah.
and it will give you like the vibes of your playlists. I don't need that from Spotify because I'm not using mine right now, but I wanted to try to vibes out my political science and smut. What is the vibe?
Yeah.
Please explain.
Yeah.
Um,
Control.
I'll say this because it's kind of relevant to what I was going to say. I started using Fable this year along with Storygraph. I prefer Storygraph personally, but if you want a more social bookish app, Fable might be good for you, Ellen, to try because it has like an algorithm based feed where even people that you aren't like friends with will like show up with like popular reviews and concepts and stuff, which might make you feel less like you're in a vacuum. And you can still follow people and see their stuff more than like the random other people, but it'll let you be like, I like fantasy or whatever. And then you'll see other people posting within the genre. It is very heavily um leaning towards the like romantasy girly crowd. It's like clearly marketed towards them. So I'll put that there. Is that like a majority it looks like is for that type of reader, like a younger like Gen Z bookish internet person, but it's there. It was a little clunky for me to figure out how to use it. It's like very social first and then book review content and like stuff second. So like I had to like really dig into how to do that sort of stuff. But it does that what you just asked for, Gretchen, where it gives you like hold on, I can tell you mine. I can pull that up really easily. It's on my thing. So for me, for 2025, I am emotionally eclectic. My bookshelf ranges from haunting gothic stories to heartwarming survival stories. The resilience found in the books carries into my life, helping me cope and adapt during times of change, according to Fable. So it does do that for everyone. It gives you like a pot and sticks you in it.
I mean, again, just for the hilarity, because I think Fable would just be like, "Do you need a wellness check?"
Yeah, I don't know what it would do with your reading. Because yeah, it's interesting, and I think that the first year that they did it, it was like AI summaried, and it got sort of flack for that, so they switched it over to being made by people, and then like those sort of terms are like, this is what this is, and here's the description by people, and then they give it based on your reading stats or whatever. So that is something that if people don't like, because Storygraph is kind of sterile. Like, it's helpful in
I mean, I
giving
like what you said though. It's
recommendations.
like it's Storygraph is charts
Yes.
first,
Yes.
Yeah.
community second.
Yes, for sure.
And so for people who like that, it really works.
Yes.
But like you said, and that's I think why Fable and Storygraph can exist at the same time, because Goodreads at this point is just Amazon ads.
Yeah. Pretty
Like
much.
it's
Yeah.
just I just get sponsored. Like
Yeah.
though I still have mine. And like I'll just open it sometimes, and where there used to be people, there's now just sponsored
Macmillan's
Amazon
hot
ads.
new blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
True. It's true. What I really want from like a book tracking app or website is something that, you know, also takes into consideration my birth chart maybe
Okay.
and gives me recommendations based on like where the stars are and
Okay.
like the moon's in
Ellen,
Scorpio,
trademark
maybe
that. Let's go. What are we
right?
doing in PhD school? Let's get out of here.
Yeah. One of the booktubers that I follow, Books and Lala, does a thing. She just did a thing where she polled her community and had them give their like Myers-Briggs, their zodiac sign, like all of these things, and then their like top 10 books, and then she like aggregated all of that to say like these are books are well loved by Cancers, and these are books that are well loved by like type 8s. Like she did that, so I might send that along to Gretchen to pass over to you.
Yeah,
So-
rewriting my dissertation proposal right now.
Because yeah, that was interesting to see, and obviously it's like not a huge sample size, but it's not tiny. She's one of the bigger booktubers, but yeah, there's definitely there's possibility there. You could take the stats on the back end and figure that out for sure. Okay, my actual reading year, is it my turn?
Tell us.
Yeah. Hi, Michaela here. I have, just as far as reading goals gone, we're not done with the year yet, and I have met my reading goal for the year, like book number wise, which was 52 books. I have read 52 exactly right now. I will probably read a couple more before the end of the year. I think when we did this video, I talked about my like 2 other like loose goals, which was to try and read 1 nonfiction book a month, and then to try and read 3 backlist books off of my shelves books. That was all based on color and stuff. That kind of fell apart in the second half of the year. I was like more or less on track when we touched base in like August, September time. But I did a project where I did a couple videos reading the best horror books of 2024 from the Goodreads Choice Awards. And that sort of took over my reading for a couple of months. And it took that long because I read 10 books for those 2 videos. And then like all of my other things fell apart. So I'm probably not going to complete those by the end of the year. I have 2 weeks left, and I'm in the process of buying a house, so that is taking all of my bandwidth, so I don't know how much more I'm going to read, but that's where I'm at least goals-wise.
That's a lot,
Yeah.
okay? You're doing a lot.
I'm doing stuff. I did read mostly horror books, partially because of that, and then also mostly queer books, which made me feel really good. Like a lot of my reading was queer rep stuff. I did also read more nonfiction than I ever have, which I think makes me feel like I did sort of accomplish that goal, which was rather than reading like 1 or 2 nonfiction books a month, usually because Gretchen makes me, to reading some of the ones that I've purchased and was interested in myself, and reading some of those. And I think that's the point of the reading goals, is not like, I don't need to completionist it. It's just to sort of push yourself outside of your normal comfort zone, maybe, or do whatever it is that you're looking for. And that's what I sort of use them for. Like, I'm not going to be sad that I didn't complete these goals, because I read a bunch of books off of my shelves that may not have been read previously, because I always feel weird about doing videos on backlist titles. And I'm trying to give myself permission to talk about old books, because apparently the bookish internet actually doesn't care as much as we thought they did, because all of these old books are getting popular again, and I'm like, fine with it. Let's talk about some backlist stuff. Let's do it. Give myself permission. And I did that. I've done that. I think that's the point of it. And will I keep doing it next year? Probably not in the same way, but I might still try to read some of the backlist titles I've got. And I might definitely still try and read some more nonfiction than I normally do, just because I don't normally reach for it. It's not the first thing that I grab off
Neither
my
do
bookshelf.
I.
Like, yeah. And it's not because I don't
Gretchen,
want
what
them.
about you?
You know, I have been known to read a nonfiction book or two in my time. This is curious. Now that you guys brought up your stats, now I want to know. Hang on. I've made my face look really ugly. It's casual. I am curious now that we've discussed this. What is my ratio on fiction to nonfiction?
Oh, let's see. I read 8 nonfiction books, which is, I think, a lot for me.
I read 15.
I read 7, and that was 13% my overall rating.
So yeah, my chart on Storygraph is almost exactly like a quarter nonfiction and three quarters fiction.
Nice. Yeah.
Usually that is also because like, right, a romance novel this big, and then I like just checked out a 32-hour audiobook on the American Revolution.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
No.
Yeah. Oh. Tangent. I don't want to take away from you if you have more things to say, but I was going to say I did also read like a metric ton of fan fiction, because that's like the majority of my reading. Like if you're like, wow, Michaela read a lot of books, that's I think if I took the word count of the books that I read and put it next to the word count of the fan fiction I read, it would be like 25% books, 75% fan fiction, because that's just how my reading is, but it doesn't get tracked in that way. So even though I read like an 140,000 word fan fiction in a 24-hour period, which could equal about 3 of the books that I read on this list. Like, it just doesn't show up here. But I read a whole bunch of fan fiction, and I might do a thing where I talk about the fan fiction that I read in January from last year, where I wrap up some of my favorites of the year, because I don't think I talked about it very much this year in like roundtables and stuff, because I was reading books for like the first time in a long time, and I like wanted to talk about the books that I was reading, because yeah, the last several years my book reading has been in like the 20s, like 20 something books, and most of those were read for videos with Gretchen and I, so it didn't make sense for me to bring those to roundtables because we were already doing videos on them. But this year I was reading stuff for myself, and I could talk about it here, so I did. But that let my fanfiction recs fall to the side. But I'll do something. I'll do something right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just goes back to like, we're talking about like our numbers and tracking, and like it's all good, but like nobody should ever let it take over their lives, or like being comparing themselves to someone else.
Yeah.
Because like I said, as long as you're reading.
Yep.
And whatever that looks like for you, like audiobooks, fan fiction, books, graphic novels, like this is literacy positivity.
Yep.
Yes. 1000%.
Does that mean I now get to talk about my podcast?
Yeah, talk about your podcast.
Ooh.
Okay. So a lot of things that, and again, like I say, I haven't been reading, right? But again, like if I tracked my podcast listening this year, and like put that like in the same way that I can track my audiobook numbers, right? Listen, Patreon should do a wellness check. But I actually did this year sign up for my first ever Patreon account because of a podcast.
Hey.
And I literally just have this Patreon for this podcast. I actually talked about it in my pseudo book to doc review of the Delphi murders. And so we can link that up above, and I'm not going to talk about that here, but it's called Murder She Watched. And I think it's really important because it is a podcast that watches true crime documentaries and then gives you a summary. So if you are someone who cannot afford to have 11,000 streaming services, but you're like really curious about this new documentary, you can listen to them give a summary. But then they also will like critique them and talk about them, and like, you know, as like a genre, which is something that true crime desperately needs, since so much of it is so sensationalized. So just like a plug for one of the podcasts that has absolutely kept me going this year, because I've talked about this, like, you know, when I was doing my dissertation, I like would just be so tired. And so I would just be like lying down, like listening to things. So podcasts for that. They were also episodic, so I didn't need to like be like, oh my God, what happened in chapter 5 that I read like or listened to 3 days ago. Yeah. Right. but also then when I was done with my dissertation data collection, I had thousands of pages of student work to scan, and I was just like playing podcasts and like doing that. I have recently been listening to a podcast that was actually recommended by people, and we call it Murder Club. Not that we do murders, but we talk about them a lot. As far as I know, maybe there's a secret group.
I'm not in it.
But so as part of this other podcast, and it's called Dead Certain, the Martha Moxley murders. And it is still ongoing. There's like a couple of episodes left. But it is from, I was about to say MSNBC, but I think they're MS Now or whatever this strange rebrand is that they've put this out. And it really throws me off because it's the same like do tones in the beginning as one of my like Supreme Court podcasts, and then it goes into a true crime thing, and like my brain doesn't know what to do with that. But anyway, so this is important context. So Martha Moxley was murdered 30 to 40 years ago. She was a teenager. She was out on like Halloween mischief night with her friends, and then she never came home by curfew, and in the morning they found her body. And she
Where'd they find it? Sorry.
In the woods, actually near her home.
Okay.
Unfortunately, actually, she was found by one of her friends. And she was found to be missing clothing items below the waist. So there was an inference that she was not only murdered, but other things had happened to her as well. And Martha Moxley happened to have been at a friend's house that night, and she had been at friends the Skakels. Now, unless you're me or a Kennedy head, Skakel may not be a last name that's familiar to you, but the most famous Skakel was probably Ethel Skakel, who became Ethel Kennedy, who was married to Bobby Kennedy. And so these are vaguely through marriage Kennedy relations. The podcast will go into how they actually like those families didn't actually like each other. But of course, once this news starts to break, it's all Kennedy relatives, Kennedy relatives, Kennedy relatives. Like,
right, yeah.
Get over yourselves. But anyway, when Martha is originally murdered, there is an assumption that Tommy Skakel has done the murder. And to make a long story short, they can't pin it on him. There's some weird evidence. Then they think it's like the Skakel's tutor who is known to have sexually assaulted women before. But
Perfect
they can't
for
necessarily
a resume.
Like, what? Right. It was a different time in like the 70s or whenever this was. And then eventually the murder, like literally like 30 years later, based on some very sketchy evidence, is pinned on Michael Skakel. And he does eventually go to jail for this. But he has since been released because the trial was so shoddy.
Did he do it?
I don't know, that it's not over yet. You want me to make a conclusion?
Do you think he did it?
Okay, so this is very important though. So the person who's doing this podcast helped RFK Jr. ghostwrite a book about this, in which he was trying to defend his cousin, Michael Skakel. So what I have found fascinating about listening to this documentary, and I was talking to Michaela about this a little bit before we came on, but like I am, as a person who reads all of this nonfiction, I am here to tell you that nonfiction is fiction in the sense of it is a constructed story. So anybody who tries to come at you with a nonfiction book that they're like, I have no bias, is a liar, liar, pants on fire. Like you can try really, really hard, but I actually prefer my nonfiction where they come out and say, this is my bias. And in this case, we're not saying bias is a bad word.
Yeah.
We're just saying bias is like, this is what I believe. This is where I stand on certain things, you know, like, so because that's going to color the story that they tell. And again, not in a bad way, but that's like what they're interested in, what they want to talk about, how they're going to talk about it. And so in the first episode, the guy doing this is like, hey, so just so everybody knows, like 20, 10, 15 years ago, I forget exactly, I helped RFK Jr. write this book, which is when I got introduced to all of these people. But he was like, since then, more things have happened. So Michael has been released. I still have like a connections to these family members, and like more and more stuff has come out about the investigation and what happened. And he was like, this is just like a bugaboo that has never left me. And I want to like do this podcast about this now. And the number of people that are like, oh, he's just been paid off by the Kennedys to do this, because he so far very clearly does not think Michael actually did it. Now, I would argue that whether or not he did do it, and there is very sketchy evidence to say that he did, this investigation was so poorly done that, like, as a member of a responsible jury, whether or not I think he did it is irrelevant. He never should have been convicted.
Yeah.
Right. Based on how our justice system is like meant to work. And obviously there is like a lot about like, you know, his privilege, his family, they were rich, but also he's like partially convicted because his dad tried to like hire a private investigator team to prove that he didn't do it. And he said some things to them that got released that sounded weird. But anyway, it's like a whole thing. But I have just been finding it so funny about some of the comments that I've seen on it where they're like, oh, like this isn't, he should never have been allowed to do this because he like, you know, he worked for Robert Kennedy that one time. Robert Kennedy, by the way, is not in this, RFK Jr. so far. I don't know, maybe he shows up later. But I just find it so funny because I'm like, he came out in the beginning and said that's where he started. He tells us that's how he has this access, because like he speaks to Michael about like being incarcerated, being at the trial, like what that was like. And I'm like, he told you this. So like I can, therefore, using my critical mind, listen to this, enjoy the story, which is pretty bonkers, or not enjoy the story, but like, you know, take in the story about like, I mean, someone was still murdered. And unfortunately now that family does not have justice or believes justice was not served, which is very terrible for them. But like, I can critically listen because he told me up front, right? And I'm just like, that's actually the nonfiction that I prefer, is like, tell me up front where you stand so that I can then take that into account and then make my own like assumptions, arguments, conclusion. Right? Like, and so I even though it's not over, and I wouldn't say it's like the best podcast I've ever listened to, it's absolutely not. I'm listening to it, but like I wouldn't like give it a gold trophy. I just kind of wanted to like talk about nonfiction generally as something that I really, really love. And I absolutely despise the number of nonfiction books that I've read where like in the beginning, they're like clearly pretending that they're not biased, but then they're trying to like subversively push you in a direction. And I'm like, just tell me that this is your argument so that I can see if you defend it.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I don't, and again, I will die on this hill. Nonfiction is fiction. And it does not do us any good to pretend otherwise. That's why I got into my biography work to begin with, because I read like 4 different biographies on George Washington and they were all different. And if biography was unbiased and the same series of events in the same way, they all would have been the same book, right? We would only need one biography on one person to exist.
Yeah.
We could have just stopped at the Chernow and never moved.
I mean, those would also probably be really boring, though, because it would literally just be a recitation of facts with, like, nothing else. Because that's the only way that you can be unbiased, is just be like, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened.
But
no other commentary or flavor added.
Yeah.
But I mean, even then, you know, because I was just talking, so I presented at a conference recently about Native Americans in George Washington. And I was talking about the difference between just calling it the French and Indian War versus King James's War. So yeah, you can say a war happened, but what are you calling it? and like it makes a difference.
Yep.
Also recently watched the new Kendra Burns documentary on the Revolutionary
Ooh,
War.
you did.
I did, and we do
In one
not have
day?
time for my thoughts. I watched it in 2.
Okay.
So I have thoughts. I have thoughts about what they put in and what they left out and how they talked about some of those things. Because again, it's an interpretation. So anyway, if you are looking for some excellent documentary or excellent podcasts that I've been listening to lately, the second season of Elizabeth is currently being released, and season 1 is completely done, and it is about a woman who is one of the most wild, insane scammers I've ever heard about. Like the people the last episode that was just released, like I never listened to anything on anything higher than like 1.2 times speed, and I had to speed through it because it was so heart-wrenching to listen to. And again, is another one where I'm seeing comments of like, oh, how could these people be so stupid? And I'm like, listen, until you're in it, and I think they've done a really good job in their episodes, even though some people clearly aren't understanding, of showing how that like being put in like a situation of like emotional trauma constantly by a scammer can like get you to do things you wouldn't normally do. So that's been really good. Murder She Watched, obviously, was really good. And then I do think the best, I just recently finished Uncover's latest season, which is from the CBC, which was called Allison After Nexium. So Allison Mack, who was made, unfortunately, infamous by the Nexium sex cult, has done a podcast for the first time after leaving prison. But Uncover also was responsible for my favorite true crime podcast this year, which was called Sea of Lies. And it starts off with there's a body in the ocean that is found, and they're trying to figure out who this guy is. They find his best friend. Best friend says, I have no idea. Case goes cold. Years later, a cop is trying to find this best friend as they try to like reopen the case. He goes into the wrong driveway, knocks on the wrong house, and he says, I'm so sorry, I'm lost. They're like up in the backwoods of Canada. Like, I'm sorry, I'm lost. I'm looking for X. And they say, well, that person doesn't live here or anywhere near here. And they're like, the only people who live here are this person and this person. And they give the name of the dead guy, which is when they find out the best friend assumes the dead guy's identity.
Can't wait to listen to this.
So
it sounds
Uncover
like
from
a
the CBC.
sea of lies.
I know. Uncover from the CBC, hot take of like ice cold take. Every single season of that show is, because it's like they do a series of different investigative stuff. I've just started playing the whole playlist. They're on to like season 30 something now.
Oh, yeah.
They're all of really high quality.
Nice.
So, but anyway, if you take nothing else away from this, nonfiction is fiction. For the love of Pete. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yay.
Do you use a podcast app that like aggregates stuff? I know my podcast app has a Wrapped, like a Spotify Wrapped, which might have.
I use Spotify for most of the year.
Gotcha.
And so, I mean, technically I used it long enough that I think I have a Wrapped from them.
Yeah. But does that get mixed with your music one, or do they do two separate ones? Or like the people who use audiobooks through Spotify, did they separate those out, or do
they were all in the Wrapped?
That's stupid.
My audiobooks, my podcasts. Well, they were like different. They were separated
separate
out.
tabs,
like,
but still.
You listen to like X amount of audiobooks, and because I also listened to audiobooks through on Spotify. Because you can get some really popular titles that you have to wait like 3 months at Libby for.
Yeah.
That's how I'm listening to the new RFK too, because I finally broke down and I was like, I'm not moving on this list at all. Yeah.
I use Pocket Casts, which I have used forever, but it's basically like an RSS feed aggregate. So you basically find whichever podcast you want and you can plug in the RSS feed for it and it downloads it for you.
Oh, I like that.
So if it obviously it's just podcasts, but if it's just a podcast app that you're looking for, that one's really good. I have used it forever. It's like what I've used for years and years and years.
Well, and what's kind of crazy is that a lot of the podcasts, so like I listen to Strict Scrutiny, which is three badass women who are all constitutional law lawyers and professors screaming about the Supreme Court and how awful it is. And like people like them, Murder She Watched did it. They're now on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
Like, so you can,
Yeah.
so like sometimes it's better. So like Leah Littman showed up to one of the more recent Strict Scrutiny podcasts in one of the inflatable frog costumes. And I was like, well, never mind. And I shut off the podcast and I went to YouTube. It's like, yes, please. Anyway, now that I've made Ellen do a spit take, should we have Ellen actually talk about her book?
Yes, yeah, I would love to hear
Yes.
about Ellen's book.
Okay. Wait. Hi, it's Ellen. I'm going to talk about my book after a sidetrack on ethical consumption. Yes. Okay. So I read this book a couple books ago, but I think about it a lot. It is Sea of Sea of Tranquility, Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is not the first book of hers that I've read. I've read Station 11, which I thought was great. I really loved it. What I loved even more than than Station 11, what the book was the miniseries. And I never say that. And maybe I've said it even on this podcast before, but I really thought that the miniseries outdid the book. But Sea of Tranquility, I did not really know what it was about when I first went in. I was scrolling on Libby for something available because I'm on wait lists for everything I want to read or I want to listen to, and I listened to this book. And so I went into it not knowing anything, and the story starts with an immigrant. They're in Canada. They came over. When was it? In the olden days, the unexplored Canadian wilderness.
Sure.
Like I don't think they even really settled Vancouver. That I don't know when that was. Anyway, and talks about very briefly his journey from the east coast of Canada to the west coast of Canada and this person that he encounters, and then switches narratives entirely. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's like a bunch of little short stories. I'll roll with it. And then it switches to, I think there's this woman who is looking for a friend who disappeared and tries to get in contact with her brother, but then runs into this detective who's secretly researching this. And then also there's this woman who's on a book tour. So it seems like there are these small vignettes of different people at different places, and you don't know how they're connected yet until maybe about halfway through, where we meet Gasberry, who is the main character. And you understand later on that he's been in each of these stories the whole time. This, I guess it's hard to say. There is time travel involved, so it's hard to say like present day, but the most present day in the book, they've colonized the moon, they use time travel. He is named after a character in this book that the woman was on tour promoting. um, when an epidemic broke out on Earth and she lived on the moon. Um, I'm not doing a good job of explaining this, but it's the way that the author just like ties these stories together is so surprising and comforting at the same time because every piece is fitting together and I'm just like, yes, to the point where it comes full circle and my mind explodes. Um, what eventually happens is that Gasberry knows that his sister does this time travel work and starts engaging in it. And they're trying to fix small things that have happened in time. I forget what they're calling them. Something's not right in the space-time continuum, and they go back to investigate it and they follow these trails. Eventually, he starts following his own trail. And instead of eliminating him, which they would, the, heads of the time travel agency would do, his sister hides him because she's actually figured something out that no one else had. Was that he had already, through his investigations of trying to solve this blip in time, he had already interviewed himself um, as an older man. And when she had put him into hiding, they also did like facial reconstruction surgery. So as an older person, um, he, at the end of the novel, lets his younger self interview him just the way it was supposed to be. And I'm just like, um, and just him reflecting on it and how young he is and how, he doesn't understand anything. But I think that what made this book so special, like it was a pretty quick read, honestly. Um, and I just had like this sense of curiosity the whole time I was reading it, in the sense of like, how is she tying these stories together? Um, and when I first started listening to Sea of Tranquility, I remember what listening to Station 11 was like, and it was a mood for sure. Um, and it's pretty neutral. I feel like she's able to like have these illustrious passages that still feel neutral to me. And I want more. I want more. And I think that's why I favored the miniseries over the book, is that there was so much emotion in the miniseries that I wasn't able to get from the book, but maybe that was just me. Maybe that was just me. But I think that like the quietness of this story really just made me feel all the feels. And I think that it's called the Sea of Tranquility because when they did colonize the moon, it's about, I think it was like a certain spot where this author had lived. He goes back in time to save the author, who goes back to the moon, and eventually, that whole section on the moon had to be probably wiped out because of this epidemic that spread from Earth to the moon. Anyway, I thought it was great. I thought that the character development was incredible and the plot development like snuck up on me a bit. But yeah, puzzle pieces fitting together. Ooh, feels so good. And I'm not one for like sci-fi really, but I was down with this for sure.
I know that I've seen people recommend this one for people who liked a book that Gretchen and I read last year called How High We Go in the Dark, which is
I
a
was just
similar
gonna say
it's a
sounds like
similar
that.
thing of a bunch of like individual stories that as the stories go on, you go, oh, this is all connected, and you can see like characters reappearing and like how things like come back together, even though maybe at the beginning they just seem sort of disjointed and they follow the same
Right.
timeline and theme. So yeah, if you haven't read that one or seen us talk about that one, that might be one to pick up, Ellen, because yeah, I've seen them in
What I will say
conversation.
about How High We Go in the Dark, this is incredibly important.
Yes.
Michaela and I, first of all, we have like a 30-minute review, and then we have a 2-hour deep dive where we go
Yes.
chapter by chapter.
Yes.
It is one of the saddest books I've ever read.
Yes.
I think you talked about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you talking about this, and you were like, "Whoa, we can't finish it. I don't know if we're gonna finish it. It's brutal."
Yeah, it took
It's
us like 2 months, 3 months to read it.
Yeah. I will say by the time you get to the end, like there's hope in the end.
Mhm.
But like the second chapter, they're like euthanizing children.
Yeah.
So like at an amusement park.
Yeah.
Because they have a incurable disease that will cause them intense pain. And so one of the choices that the society has made, you could either like have your kid go through this and then they're in like screaming pain and like devolving into basically a non-human thing that no longer like can move or think or like stuff like that. Or you can send them to the amusement park where they go on a roller coaster that's called like the Anubis or something, and they die peacefully. So yeah, that's like chapter 2. Okay, so like you have to be ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that is something.
Yeah.
And but it's the same thing. It's like that very beautiful, like not like an in your face, but like what you're describing, like that quiet, like pain, that quiet, like reflective, like, you know, it's incredibly moving, but it's not like deeply dramatic.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Right. It's when she was writing, it's like she was taking through the audience through like every thought that was clicking into place for the characters. And that's what I really appreciated most.
I think that, I mean, obviously I haven't read this one. I've only read Station 11. And Station 11 for me was a book that we read for book club years ago now at this point. Because we've been here.
Came out in 2016.
Yeah. So we would have read this near the beginning of the channel then, probably.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, so I'm an English major who hates Shakespeare. So when Michaela was like, yeah, it follows a Shakespeare troupe. And I was like, it's literary fiction. It follows a Shakespeare troupe. I hate everything that is about to happen before I have hit page 1. And then I think it was that writing style that was like very accessible and not in your face. And also like her ability to interweave different characters' stories, which was also part of Station 11. I think that is such a gift, right? And like, because hearing you talk about this, like, you know, because when it's done correctly, it's like that's the feeling of like, watch it come together. But like, I mean, that's so hard to do successfully. We actually just read another collection of short stories where some of them were interconnected and some of them weren't. We just read Reservoir Bitches. And I mean, I think we spent a full chunk of that review being like, what the fuck? Like, what? This is not, the pieces were not clicking. And it's difficult. And so I'm certainly not a huge sci-fi person either, but the way that you described it, I think made it.
It was very human. It was very human. It was definitely like human experience, even with the backdrop of sci-fi. Like, you know, these technologies exist, but it was good. Good.
It almost strikes me. What was that other one that you read, Michaela? That was like Orbital.
Orbital.
Oh, I read Orbital too. Right.
Yes. Yeah. I was not the biggest fan of Orbital personally, but
it was, you know, it had this sort of the same mood, like quiet, humanity. Yeah.
I think my brain just couldn't handle Orbital. When we did that episode of Reading Roundtable, I was like, I started it on audio and then I realized that I didn't retain anything, and then I restarted it and then I realized I didn't retain anything, and then I went out and bought the physical copy to listen and read at the same time. And it was very beautifully written, but it was like my brain could not latch on to it, and therefore, which is part of the that it was. We talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like I couldn't. What is happening? Please help.
Right. I do have a friend that has a radio that could reach the International Space Station.
Nice.
To be fair, that was also though how I felt about how high we go in the dark, and I actually found someone who had made like a star chart map that like looked like constellations, but it was like the different connections and like people like stories that were connected, and because like only some of them were connected to some of them,
Yeah.
and someone made it in a way that looked like a constellation chart, which was amazing. But I did need a visual for that one because I was lost.
Yeah. Literary fiction, always fun. My turn?
Yeah,
Okay.
take us
Ellen.
away.
Yes. So, like I said in my intro, I read like so many horror books in a row that I kind of was like, I need to read not horror right now. Which is crazy, but that's just how my brain is. Even my favorite things, if I read too many of the same thing in a row, I slowly start disliking everything because I'm seeing too much of the same thing over and over again. So I decided to pick up some historical fiction, and I picked up Junie by Erin Crosby Eckstine. It was a Good Morning America book club pick, and I don't normally read, I guess I would call it commercial fiction, which I feel like these are. Like the book club picks are meant to be like very widely read and like liked by a lot of people. It's not usually where I go personally. People in my personal life have made fun of the fact that I pick very niche books in general when I'm reading that no one has ever heard of a lot of the times. Which is not a bad thing in my view. Like
No.
I like reading weird things, but I decided to pick this one up, one because I mean, look at the cover. It's freaking beautiful. It's just a gorgeous cover. And two, I don't think that I had read very many books this year by Black authors, so I wanted to pick up another Black author. This is a story set, at least in the beginning, the summer of 1860, so it's like right before the Civil War. It follows Junie, who is a slave on a plantation. Her sister, just within the last year, died from what she thinks is pneumonia from jumping into a river to save her when she had fallen into the river, and she is really struggling with the grief of feeling like she killed her sister. Like her sister wouldn't be dead if it hadn't had been for her. Climbing in trees and stuff. Junie is very much like a free spirit. During the night, she likes to like run around in the woods on the property / just outside of the property. The owner of the plantation is not often on the plantation. He's like away, and when he is home, he's like a huge drunk. So like he's not really paying attention to what's going on. Junie is a personal maid to the daughter of the owners of the plantation, so she works in the house despite being a darker skinned slave, which is weird, and other characters throughout the text will like comment on the fact that she's in the house when she like wouldn't normally be based on the structure of what it's like down there. But because she's about the same age as the daughter, they became really good friends, and so the daughter taught her how to read. That's another like very important part of Junie's character, is that she's literate, and she uses that to her advantage in offering to teach other people in order to help her. But the main crux of this story is that one night while she's out in the woods, she sees the specter of her sister, and her sister comes to her and basically says, I need you to complete my unfinished business so that I can move on. And she gives her 3 tasks, which over the course of the book, she like goes back and forth about completing, which she learns new things about how her sister died and sort of the circumstances around her death. Things like her sister had been freed by the slave owner for some reason, but wound up like dying before she could leave, obviously. And her sister was lighter skinned, so you get to sort of understand that her sister is actually the daughter of the plantation owner, which is part of why he had given her her freedom. And you're going through this. Meanwhile, Junie's friend, the daughter of the plantation owner, is sort of being shopped around because the plantation doesn't have any liquid assets. They have land, but they don't have any cash. So they are trying to marry off the daughter to a newer family who are merchants who have cash but no land. So it's this sort of thing that's going on. It's very clear that the guy who's coming in is like not more racist, because the people who own the plantation are racist, but more traditionally racist in the way that we would think, and that he's constantly making comments about Junie being in the house because of how dark she is. He beats the guy who's like his like man, his slave that helps him with stuff, I guess. I don't know the correct term for that, but like way more aggressive than the plantation owners that they're used to. They're obviously not nice and they are still racist, but they're more cordial with their slaves and treat them really better as humans. And part of the book itself is like Junie learning about that and how she kind of has had a sheltered life compared to other people in the same situation. She's 16 over the course of this, and one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading it was like, why wasn't this book YA? Like, why is this book adult fiction when there is a romance that goes on in the background between Junie and the other slave of the guy that her best friend's being married off to, and sort of the struggles that they have on if they do get married, that means that they could be together, but then she's leaving her family because she would go to live with the daughter and him at his place, wherever that would be. But if they don't get married, then she loses her love of her life, right? Because he's going to go away and they probably won't see each other very often. There's a lot of discussion about like how members of the family are sold or given away, or whatever's going on. And all of that's going on. So Junie's learning about how sheltered she is. I struggled a lot in the beginning because Junie feels like anybody who talks to her just doesn't understand, and like it like frustrated me. And I remember texting Gretchen about it, of like, she keeps saying stuff and I'm like, you have no idea the world that you're living in. But I'm like, that's a very 16-year-old child of like, I know everything and I'm smarter than you because I know how to read. So I'm more worldly than you are. So you can't possibly know anything. Like, and it's like, girl, you have no idea what is about to come to you. And yeah, there is also queer representation in this one, because we find out that her best friend, the like daughter, starts having a relationship with her husband's sister, who is also queer. So there's that sort of representation a little bit as well. And there is a whole lot of things where, because Junie discovers the women in bed together when she goes in to do something for like start the fire in the bedroom, and she didn't know that they were in there. She ends up getting beat unconscious by the husband, and like kicked out of the house. Like she's not allowed to work in the house anymore because she now knows this secret, and the sister, who is also more racist, is insecure about this person knowing this, and Junie has to like come to terms with like, I thought this person was my friend and clearly they're not if they're choosing someone else over me, which I think is a very deep topic to talk about in this, which a lot of, I think, white women struggle with, understanding why Black women don't often seek camaraderie with white women when we're like, we're all fighting the patriarchy, and it's like, yeah, but you also have a privilege that they don't have, and they can't fully trust you in the same way that we can't fully trust men to be on the side of women. So that was interesting, but I do still feel like you could have packaged this as YA and I would have zero issues. Like there's nothing in the language that makes me think that it couldn't have been like a YA fiction book that won an award for good writing, especially because it is very, I don't know, like it feels, there's nothing in here that, it's not hyper violent, it's not like crazy weird, it focuses on like a love thing that's going on, and like I don't understand why this one was pitched as like adult commercial fiction versus like a YA book.
I also feel like, based on some of the stuff that you texted me, I was just like, I would expect this of a YA protagonist.
Yes.
Like, but when I like walk into adult fiction, and I mean, this is not a good thing or a bad thing
No.
necessarily, but like even adult fiction, when they're writing children, are like
Yes.
adults.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I remember like Book of Lost Things, for example, which has a child protagonist, but is very obviously adult fiction.
Themes, yes.
Yeah, adult themes. And like, because you were sending me some parts, and I was like, yep, yeah, this is why I have DNF'd a whole bunch of YA, because I am just like, you are so insufferable in a way that is like true.
Yes.
For that age group, but also like, again, I mean, hearing you explain it this way makes a little bit more sense. But at the same time, I'm also just like, okay, if you have grown up in an enslaved society,
Yes. Yeah, how are you this
what?
naive to what is going on in your life? And
Hmm.
it's like a common thing where um her family members call her carefree, and she's constantly going, "You mean careless? You mean that I'm careless?" Because she doesn't take care in a lot of her things. Like, her family covers for her a lot, is basically what you find out, is that like she does things that could get her in trouble, and her family will always cover for her. And it's like, no, you are carefree, but you don't realize that that's on purpose because your family is protecting you. They are correct, and you just think they're using the wrong word because they don't know how to read. Like, you insufferable child. Like, please stop. Like, they are correct that you are carefree. You are also careless at times, but you don't have a lot of cares that a lot of other people in the same situation do. And it's because she's lucky in that case, of what's going on. And apparently this was at least in part inspired by her own grandmother's story of how she escaped slavery. So, there is at least a kernel of truth in there. And I did have to like sit with myself and go, like, is part of my frustration in this because I'm so used to reading trauma porn about enslavement, and is it that I'm just like having friction with reading a story where a slave is treated relatively well? Obviously not great. She is beaten to unconsciousness at one point in here, but like, part of my brain kept going, this feels unrealistic, this feels unrealistic. And it's like, is it unrealistic? Were there other people? Like, we know there's stories of slaves who were taught how to read by people. We know there's stories of slaves who were given freedom by people. So maybe it's not.
Would you like a TED Talk of the Hemmingses of Monticello?
Not on this video, but maybe at some point. But yeah.
Gosh darn it.
Yeah. So
but that is the whole point of like, if you read Annette Gordon
Yeah.
Reed's book on the Hemmingses of Monticello, is like going into how they were treated very differently. It doesn't make it good.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
But that there are like these hierarchies of treatment and placement. Like you said, lighter skin usually means you're more likely to be in the house.
Yep.
That type of a thing. But yeah, I also, yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't read it, but it is also just like, I know that as a woman, even though I lived in a, like a very, very safe place, like there were always other people being like, we got to be careful.
Yes.
So like, it's just like, it's like, no one's told you of the danger. The danger is death.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be YA. The way you described it in the story seemed very much YA.
Yes.
I was looking up the author, and it looks like that's her debut novel.
Yes.
And then Ballantine Books, which I don't think I've read anything from them.
Yeah,
They're under Penguin Random House. But maybe it was just like a marketing thing. Or maybe young adults aren't super interested in historical fiction right now.
It could have been that. I have, although I actually, I follow some like kids librarians on TikToks who are talking about how YA fantasy is actually not moving off of their shelves right now, but YA fiction is. So, which is interesting to me, because I think when we were kids, it was kind of the opposite, that like YA fantasy was like what everybody wanted to read, but YA fiction kind of, not that
That's
nobody
what I want to read.
read it, but yeah. So I don't even know if that's the case. It's just interesting to me, and I'd be curious to hear. I mean, maybe Erin Crosby was like, no, this is for adults, and it's not that adults don't need to read the story. It was just the structure and the themes felt very YA fiction award bait. Yeah. Like, this is what this book would have been.
It came up for a Goodreads award, right?
Yes, it I think both debut and in the historical fiction. Maybe just historical fiction, but it was definitely.
And quite frankly, unfortunately, for the time that we live in, did they just decide that it would be
more widely
read? I don't want to say easier.
Yeah.
But like, this is the type of book that as a YA book would get challenged.
Maybe. Yeah.
Because it has queer themes. It has, themes of discussing levels of racism. I mean, it's absolutely a YA book that would get challenged.
Good point, Gretchen. Good point, Gretchen.
Yeah. And maybe that, again, it was, I don't normally read popular fiction in this way, so I don't know if this is on par with other like Good Morning America book club books or like Reese book club books. Like
If
I
I
tend not
can
to
say
read those.
something
Yeah.
controversial, as someone who used to run like that style book club for my Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
it felt like every single protagonist of every single one of those books was a middle-aged white lady.
That's what I was confused
Mhm.
about too, because I was
Yep.
like, the protagonist is young. Like it 16 is young, I feel like, for because I feel like the audience of these is middle-aged white ladies. So that makes sense to me for why that would be. They would
I
pick those books.
hated doing that.
Yeah.
When I think of like book club books, though, I feel I just immediately think of Where the Crawdads Sing, and
Yeah.
that's it. And I'm just like, oh, books like that. But that also had like a pretty young protagonist. I mean, she was young for most of half of it. I don't know.
Doesn't she also commit murder?
Yeah. Well, when
Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Gretchen, I think that your point about, protecting the title and the integrity of the author's work by classifying it as an adult is probably it.
I mean, and we also don't know too, just because this is the debut novel, could have come to Valentine on a, it's not typical, but like I don't know, maybe eventually like the reason that she showed up on their radar was an adult book, but then she also like had this, because just because it's
Mm,
their debut
Mm,
one doesn't mean it's the first one that they either read, that they either wrote or sold.
right.
right.
So like I mean there's also that too, but I like when I think about it, it's just like I just, and I mean I don't advocate for that as a, because obviously we young adults need to read complicated literature, but I can absolutely see particularly a smaller publishing house just being like, I mean they're under Penguin Random House, but like I mean I can
Yeah.
see it
Yeah.
Yeah.
as an option someone would take potentially.
Hmm.
I think I ended up giving it 4.25 stars on Storygraph, even though I did really struggle to get into it. Like, it took me a while to get there. And it may have just been a couple of things. Like I said, I was like a little bit in a reading slump after reading a bunch of the same thing over and over again. So maybe I just wasn't doing it. Historical fiction isn't my go-to genre either. It's not one that I read a lot of, but you know, it took me a while to get into it, but when I did, I was like, okay, I can see what you're doing here, and I, can empathize with it, and I do think it's an important story to tell, especially when stories like this are sort of trying to be thrown away by our,
Mm.
our government. It is part of our history and
Mm.
something that we should sort of look at. So, um, I think I do recommend it. The audiobook was good. I borrowed or at least started the audiobook. I didn't finish it in time before my audiobook had to go back to the library. But I had it physically, so that wasn't a problem. I could finish it out then. So
Mm.
yeah. It's interesting. If it's something that you even might be marginally interested in, the story was good. But just be prepared for Junie to kind of be a little bit insufferable. Of like, oh my god, you don't know everything.
That's even worse for me in audio because I remember trying to listen. I almost never do fiction on audio.
Yeah.
But I went through a period where I was like trying to do it, and I was trying to read this one. I think it was like a Rochelle Mead book or
Mm.
something, and that it was an insufferable YA main character. And then, I mean, it was not the fault of the audiobook narrator. The audiobook narrator was doing justice to what they were given, and I was like, if I have to listen to this for one more second,
Yeah.
I will tear my ears off. Like at least if I was reading, I could speed through you being an idiot.
Yeah.
Oh. So this was our last reading roundtable of the year, which feels crazy. Michaela and I had a conversation a little while ago about how like we feel like we just started these, and now like we've done like full years of them.
Yep.
And so we are so grateful to our friends like Ellen who are willing to come back and hang out with us and talk about books, and inspire both us and hopefully you to maybe pick up something you either hadn't heard about, or at times even remind you of something that you hadn't heard about that you're going to circle back for. And so we will return with more of these in January, in a totally confusing move. We have maybe even planned the theme already of our January one. I'm not going to reveal it though in case we change our mind. But obviously we will be back with more of these. As it is the end of the year, our upcoming content, perhaps not super surprising, we'll be doing our best ofs, worst ofs. This was also the first year in the history of this channel that Michaela and I completed our full 10 buddy reading prompts. And at a certain point, I think we'll do like a wrap up of that and talk about that, because I do think obviously I love it every year that we do it, but we really did push ourselves this year to think, okay, we're not just going to say we're reading a translated book. We're going to look at the translated texts we have read in the past, and we're going to be like, and we realized there was a lot of Asian ones, so we like pushed into new areas.
Yep.
And so I'm excited to talk about that process. And then yeah, then we'll be releasing, we have no buddy reading challenges to roll over this year. So we've never had to create 10 new challenges from scratch. So sometime in January, you'll be able to look forward to us being deeply confused by this assignment as well. So thank you so much for a wonderful year. Remember, it doesn't matter the number of books that you read. It doesn't matter what you read. Were they really books? Like, we're not here for any of that. We are here for, were you reading? Were you learning? Were you thinking? And were you having a good time? And we support all of that, no matter how and what you did that with. And we hope that you will do some more enjoying of your time with us in the new year. So thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Bye.